The Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said to the 12, "A disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher and the slave like the master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's own foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves a son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Earlier this week, I was talking about this passage from Matthew with some colleagues, and one of them pointed out the rather absurd irony of reading this on Father's Day. Here, Jesus does not hold up the 4th commandment, honor your father and mother, nor any other ideas about happy families, but rather he states clearly, I have come to set a man against his father. You will not find this on a Hallmark card. And I hope it is not what most of us will experience today. As we will see, Jesus wasn't actually advocating these poor intrafamilial relations. He has something very specific in mind that might cause family discord. But as I worked through these words of Jesus, which are not some of the most uplifting and encouraging things we'll ever hear from him, I was reminded of the other federal holiday we've observed this weekend. Friday was Juneteenth. Juneteenth is a holiday that's actually over 160 years old, but has only been a U.S. federal holiday for 5 years. Many of us had not heard of Juneteenth until fairly recently, and maybe you still don't really know about it. Briefly, Juneteenth serves to remind us to remember a particular kind of injustice, the kind that results when people are kept from receiving the rights to which they are entitled. It's the difference between being given your freedom as an enslaved person and actually experiencing that freedom. Specifically, Juneteenth recognizes the day that happened 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, when the enslaved people in Texas were finally given their freedom, months after the Civil War had ended. They had their freedom, but they didn't know it. So that's the short version of Juneteenth. But what I want to think about now is that I started to read this passage from the 10th chapter of Matthew through the lens of Juneteenth. What do these things Jesus is saying mean in relation to this kind of injustice that kept a large group of people from living the life they were meant to live for so much longer than necessary? Well, the low-hanging fruit happens in the first few verses. It is enough for the slave to be like the master. Perhaps you know that during and before and after the Civil War, there were preachers in slaveholding states who found verses in the Bible that seemed to support the ownership of human beings by other humans. And I expect there were abolitionist preachers who would have found Matthew 10:24-25 to offer this contrasting idea that slaves and their masters should be something like equals. That's what we have here. Now, we know that there were arrangements in Jesus' time that were known as slavery, but we know that those arrangements didn't look exactly like what was happening in the U.S. in the 19th century and before. What matters is that we remember that those who live enslaved are not able to fully live the life they were granted by their Creator. Now we revisit what I talked about in the children's message. 3 times Jesus says, "Don't be afraid." 3 times means pay attention. Listen to what I'm saying. So if we think about that being afraid through the historical Juneteenth lens, we can think about that those formerly enslaved people were going to need to learn to live as free people. And that meant there were going to be things to fear. But we can also read it through a modern Juneteenth-oriented lens and consider that many people, whether or not they are descended from formerly enslaved people, have plenty to fear. There are many people in our culture who aren't able to live in freedom, the freedom that God intended for them when they were created. For me, the most important way that the Juneteenth lens helps me understand this passage is the final one, the one with that turning the man against his father phrase, which is buried among a whole lot of other conflicted relationships. And to help understand this, I want to go back to last week when we read a section from Matthew that is the lead-in to this section. You might remember the unusual packing instructions from Jesus. Go out on this mission trip, but don't take any money, don't take extra shoes, don't take extra clothes. But there's a verse that I especially want us to think about. Jesus said, "As you go, proclaim this good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the leper, cast out demons. This is their job description, and it is not an easy one. Jesus knows they will encounter trouble. People aren't always pleased to have their status quo disrupted by a traveling preacher or anyone else who's trying to make lives better. Jesus is telling them to go for it anyway. And he ends with a line that is probably meant to be encouraging. Those who lose their life for my sake will find it. It will all be worth it. That may or may not be comforting, but that is what we have. That is our reality. Back to Juneteenth. I heard a wonderful quote to remind us why this holiday is important for all of us. Freedom isn't real until everyone experiences it. It made absolutely no difference to those enslaved people in Texas back in the 19th century that they were free until they were actually able to live free. And the reality is that as long as there is anyone who is not free, we are all not free. Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have come not to bring peace, but a sword." Jesus knew that his message of the kingdom, the one he charged his disciples to spread, would not be accepted by all. There would be people who would resent it, who would not understand the need for equality, the need for all to be able to live without fear. But he was clear that that message must be spread, even at the cost of some of our dearest relationships, even in the mid-19th century United States, even now. The kingdom of heaven has come near means that all God's children will live in peace and freedom. Now, I usually draw a heavy line between those festivals or holidays that are of our church calendar and those of society. That's why you will not hear me preaching about Independence Day in 2 weeks, or even Father's Day today. But I made an exception of a different kind this morning. I chose to give prominence to the U.S. holiday of Juneteenth for a very specific reason. Because as we stepped through today's reading from Matthew, you heard a different way to understand those messages. And each of those messages of Jesus points directly to the important messages of Juneteenth. Freedom, love, making this world the best it can be for all God's people. That's what Juneteenth is about, and that is what the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus are about. Amen.